The first time my husband reviewed my family history writing, he looked at a section and said, "This makes absolutely no sense." And I remember thinking, well, that was brutal. But on the flip side, I had people read my work and say, "This is wonderful," and give me nothing else. The first feedback stings. The second feels great, but neither helps us improve our family histories, be they personal or ancestral. So if you're writing family history and you actually want it to make sense to someone besides yourself, let's fix the feedback problem. Let's be honest. When you're writing your family history, you already know the story, who people are, what happened, and how it all fits together. Your reader doesn't. As such, what seems obvious to you can be completely confusing to someone else. Case in point, when I was doing the writing challenge for Jen Baldwin, she had been researching her fourth great grandfather, Archie, for 15 years. When I came along to write the story, I didn't know everything that she knew. And so I ran into a few challenges writing his story. If you missed that episode, please check out the link in the description box below. I thoroughly enjoyed that writing challenge. So with that in mind, what do you want to hear? Something like, "I wasn't sure who that person was when you switched names." Or in Jen's case, "Hey, you didn't include habeas corpus. Where should that go?" All of this feedback is helpful. It's something you can take action on. So feedback shouldn't be about getting compliments. It's about being told what you can specifically change. And the first place to fix this is how you ask for feedback. Most people ask for feedback like this: "What did you think?" And what do they get back? Comma placement fixes, grammatical errors such as verb tense. Maybe somebody helps you remember how to spell the word cemetery. While I always appreciate those kinds of edits, I'm really after something else entirely. Did the story make sense? Was anything confusing or unclear? Did I forget to pronounce something for you or give you a pronunciation guide? Is there any word that you don't understand how to say, but also you don't know what it is? That's the kind of feedback that will help you. If you have other suggestions of the type of feedback you want to have, be sure to leave a comment in this discussion below. When you give these questions to the reader, you are saying, "Hey, I know you're not a trained editor, but I trust you to know when something is confusing or wandering off into tangents or just doesn't feel right." Now, if you want a list of these questions, I will put mine on the companion blog to this video so you can go grab them and use them when you're inviting someone to give you some feedback. Now, here's the flip side of requesting feedback, and it is how to handle someone telling you how they really feel about the way you wrote a story. The first time my husband reviewed my writing, he read a section and said, "This absolutely makes no sense." And I remember thinking, "Oh, thanks, babe." Not. But he's not saying, "Devon, you're a terrible writer." He loves me too much. But if you have a harsh person like me, what he's really asking for are the blinding stage lights. "Celebration time, come on," from Kool and the Gang. That's the opening music that's playing loudly through the speakers. And then the heels clicking across the wooden floor, the taffeta in the tulle swishing as Aquanet-style hair permeating the air as teenagers wave their arms in some kind of synchronized movement thing. Suddenly, the scene not only makes more sense, but Andy can immerse himself into the scene. Let's go back to the Jen Baldwin experience. In the introduction, I started with her ancestor Archie was in the courthouse. I started by describing that there were neighbors and there were possibly people who hired him and family members all waiting in this cold, noisy courtroom with the magistrates raised above and him standing at the bar. And he's the accused on that day. Now, in another video by Carol Baxter, she talks about the fact that we can make some judgments, some rational judgments of why things are happening and how we tell a story. Our readers are asking for clarification on our decision making. They're not insulting us for making those decisions. And they're asking for more insight into the research process. Now, occasionally, some of that research thought process really needs to be dived deeply in an appendix, and we're going to talk about that in a different video. But whenever they're asking for more context, don't take it as an insult. Now, feedback is a two-way street. If you ask somebody for help, you might need to return the favor. In fact, you should any chance you get, because here's an interesting little surprise. Reviewing the writings of others can inspire you to tell a better story. And that is why I appreciated doing some writing reviews. And when I do coaching calls, which I hope to do some more in the future, let me know in the comments if you'd be willing to be on a coaching call. Now, I can't review everybody's stories, but when I get the opportunity, karma works, y'all. It works. I want to set the stage of what usually happens so that we can relate to the experience of a typical feedback exchange, and then let's see if we can make it better. A typical comment could be, "This part doesn't work." Okay, but why? Because I think it works. So instead, better feedback is, "I got confused by the sequence of events in this story. Can you clarify what happened first?" When you're giving that feedback, it helps a writer revise with that in mind instead of trying to figure out what part doesn't work. Another experience. "This is great. I love it." Are you catching on by now that this isn't really helpful? I really like the opening. It pulled me in. However, when you started talking about William on the rail car, I don't know how he got there from the mustering in ceremony. What am I missing? So you can praise somebody for their writing, but then make a request if something doesn't go right. Another example I had, this goes back to the Jen Baldwin experience. She said, "Wow, that was really dramatic." Okay, that's great feedback. I was a little worried. I didn't really think it was that dramatic. I mean, I was going for a hook. But what I loved was what basically she said, "Wait, you actually started getting me thinking. But now I'm not really sure about that." And so the feedback led to a discussion about what should or shouldn't be in the scene. Now, this is the hardest feedback to deal with. "You should say this differently." Why is that one hard to hear? Well, because sometimes it feels like a person giving feedback is trying to steal your voice. But are they really helping you clarify your sentences? A better way to be very clear when you're giving feedback about how to say something different, give more specifics. "This sentence feels a little long. Maybe you can tighten it." Or, "I'm really getting lost in the names of 19 jurors. Could you maybe put that in a sidebar so it's off to the side? It's there if I'm curious, but it doesn't slow down the story." Are you seeing the difference between feedback that help you can get in better results and those that are less than helpful? When you give feedback, this is my biggest tip. When you give feedback, don't put them in a defensive mode, but put them in a reviser mindset. So to do this, instead of making statements of what to do, frame suggestions as questions. The first group of questions are timeline questions. Did this happen before or after these people moved? Did he get married before or after the trial? I'm not sure how these events connect. Can you clarify the order? You see, you're asking timeline questions And then when you specify the events that are confusing, you're not attacking the person, you're just asking for clarification. And those aren't questions that most writers should take offense to. The next group is identity and name questions. First of all, are these two people the same person with the same name variation? Sometimes they are, and we need to add some nicknames or habitual naming pattern strategies within a context so we know that we're talking about Johannes who married Katharina and Johannes who married Sarah. they were all Johannes Ulrich, but how do you tell the story when you need to talk about both at the same time? So be sure to say something like, are these two people the same? Did this person go by another name earlier? Sometimes, oh my goodness, I've seen this happen. Sometimes in childhood, somebody is known as Bubba because there are multiple Roberts in the family. And so, well, you're the youngest and we're going to call you Bubba. But when you grow up, he's now called Robbie. If you don't help your reader know that's the same person, or you're lost as the reader going, is Bubba and Robbie the same? Go ahead and ask for that feedback. Again, within the name confusion is the pronoun game. And I've mentioned this on this channel before, and you can find a tutorial about that linked in the description. It really gets confusing when there's 3 men or 3 women or some combination thereof. And the paragraph, suddenly he is doing everything. He was hitting him while he was shouting at I can't even think about it because I want to say Bob hit Larry because Larry was making comments at Joe, and then Joe was doing something back to Bob, right? We're going to use their different names, but in a number of drafts, you will find everything is he and him, and we don't know who did what. So to get clarity, you can ask, I lost track of the he referring to here, and maybe highlight the pronouns in that section. Like all these he's and hims or she's and hers and all that other stuff, I'm confused. And then ask, can you clarify who's doing what in this scene? The next group of questions are questions that relate to missing context. You will often ask something like, what is the backstory behind what's happening in this scene? For instance, Jen Baldwin was talking about the white boys and the troublemaking they had been doing. You can also say, can you explain this context for this religious practice or custom or court practice or festival day? Can you give me more details about what's happening? Another group is missing explanation. What does this term mean? There was a term in Jen's story about a traverses, and it seemed to be someone who, even though they may have pled guilty, they disagreed with the accounts that people were giving about his actions on that day. Well, you can't just use that term and assume everybody knows what it is. So you can ask, what does this word mean? Another really good one is, how do you pronounce this word? This place name. Another explanation, why is Sarah doing this job when others are available to her? Another group of questions are relevance. Why are you mentioning when Elvis was on the Ed Sullivan show when your ancestor preferred opera? Actually, a kind of good question. How does this information move the story forward? Could it serve as a sidebar or a footnote? I like questions that offer a suggestion, especially for tangent topics, instead of saying, this is so boring, this is not related, and just exit. Some people might actually like that extra details. So the suggestion of, hey, do you think this would fit better as a sidebar? Great way to give feedback to somebody's story that you're writing. Whenever you're trying to get emotional clarity, these would be questions like, What would your ancestor feel about what happened to their brother? What might your ancestor feel as they travel 1,000 miles away from home? What would your ancestor be thinking about the day he was arrested and placed in the prison his father used to be the keeper of? And finally, as genealogists, we could start initially with, what is the source you use for this information? Why are you not mentioning this couple's wedding days? How do you know that he was connected here? When you ask questions, when you give feedback, the writer you're trying to help is often driven to respond with an answer. Now, not everything can be put into question. I get that. But if you feel like something might not land well, then I do recommend trying to put it in a question rather than a statement. It will likely get better results. Now, writers are often uncertain about their manuscripts. They need to know that something, anything is going well. So find a way to offer a genuine praise for something they are doing well. How would you feel if somebody wrote, I really like how you drew me into the life in the 1840s by describing the setting. I can hear the axes striking and I can see the muddy road. Oh man, I'd love it. So another way to ask for more of this and as a form of praise to get somebody to do something that they're doing well, say this part of the story is fascinating. Can you include more details about what's going on? But let the reader know why you're asking for so many details in one place, because then they realize, oh, you really like it. Now, if every viewer of this video and I commit to improving how we give and receive feedback, there are still a couple of things that can trip us up. I have harped on avoiding presentism in our writing on this channel many, many times. There is a link to the video in the description if you need a refresher or haven't seen it before. If you're reviewing a story and you get offended easily, you need to pause. Our ancestors were not perfect. They said hurtful things. They did things that you would never condone, but they lived in a very different time. And respectful writing documents those differences. Your role is not to sanitize a story. It's to help the writer feel the tale clearly in all its uncomfortable details. There is a difference between saying, this is offensive, you shouldn't include this, and saying, are you aware that statement may offend this part of your audience? One invites the writer to increase their awareness and make an informed decision. The other shuts down the story at best or whitewashes history at worst. The goal of feedback is not to show how amazing you are as the reader. And it's not to write the story the way you would tell it. If you're going to write it differently, go write your own story. And it's definitely not to make an author feel like they are terrible and should quit. The goal is simple. Make the story clearer and more enjoyable for you as a reader. There's one more place that we need to discuss feedback. What do you actually do with all the feedback you receive? Because here's the truth, not all feedback is equal. And not all feedback is right. Don't feel like you have to make a change just because somebody suggested it. So how do you decide what to keep from your feedback recommendations and what to discard? First, look for patterns. If something is mentioned once, consider it. If it's mentioned twice, you have a signal of a potential issue. And if it's mentioned more than 4 times, you definitely have an issue you should address. Separate clarity for preference. If feedback is a request to clarify something, add more details, explain the timeline better, then address it. If the feedback is about word choice or preferences, consider it. Perhaps somebody wouldn't use that strong of a language. Okay, I'll consider it. Could I use an alternative? Or, yeah, actually, that's the word that I think best fits here. Consider it. A fresh set of eyes on a story often will pick up something that you didn't see beforehand and that you revise 10 times and still didn't see it. But the reviewer thought there was something that needed to be corrected or considered. This kind of feedback makes you think, yeah, I think you might be right, or how did I miss that? That's definitely something you wanted to address. Learn to receive the feedback and give the kind of feedback you wish you had received, because better feedback creates better writing, and better writing helps us connect with our loved ones so they can feel a greater sense of belonging and connection with those who've gone before. If you made it this far in the video, you will be interested to know this video is part of a series called Write With Me, where I'm sharing the process of writing my forthcoming book about William James Townsend. And if you want to practice what we talked about today, I've linked chapters from that project on my blog, and you'll find the links in the description below. You can read them, try giving feedback using the exact strategies from this video. But thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next Write With Me video. Remember to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe on your way out. Then go write your family history.